I never imagined that my sister's dinner table would become the battlefield where my entire life unraveled and rebuilt itself in a single night. But that's exactly what happened. One moment, I was walking into her marble-floored mansion with a bottle of expensive wine in my hand, hoping to finally hear the words of pride I'd chased for decades. The next, I was standing drenched in ice water, staring down the people I once called family, people who had just applauded my humiliation. If you had been there, you would have seen it too. The chandelier glowing like a crown above us, the polished mahogany table groaning under the weight of courses prepared by her private chef, the perfectly manicured garden visible through tall French windows. From the outside, it looked like the picture of a perfect family gathering. But under the gleam of crystal glassware and the scent of roasted lamb, there was a rot no amount of wealth could cover up. And that rot had always been there. The invitation I couldn't refuse. When Jessica called me 2 weeks earlier, her voice had carried a tone I hadn't heard in years. Pride, not envy, not dismissal, not the brittle laughter that always made me feel like a tolerated guest at my own family's table. No, this time it was different. Amity, she'd said, the syllables of my name stretched thin and elegant, like she was tasting them for the first time. I saw your name in Alan's business journal. Something about a big case, we should celebrate. Come to dinner on Saturday. I remember the way I froze in my office chair, my phone pressed to my ear. For 10 years, I had worked 80-hour weeks, building my name as a real estate attorney in Boston. I'd just won a landmark case, exposing a development company that preyed on elderly homeowners, stealing their properties with false code violations. The legal victory had made the front page of industry journals. For once, my name wasn't just whispered in courtrooms but spoken in boardrooms. And Jessica had noticed. That was all it took. Decades of being overlooked, brushed aside, compared, diminished, and suddenly I was spending $200 on a bottle of wine I couldn't afford, buying a new outfit, and even booking a manicure. I told myself it wasn't for her, that it was about celebrating my own victory. But deep down, I knew the truth. I still wanted to be chosen. Walking into the lion's den. The night of the dinner, I drove past sprawling estates with fountains and iron gates until I turned into Jessica's circular driveway. Her mansion was massive, Tudor-style, all sharp angles and glowing windows. It looked like something out of a magazine spread about success. My little sedan looked embarrassed parked between Alan's glossy black Range Rover and my father's new Mercedes. I told myself to breathe, to stand tall, to walk in like the accomplished woman I had become, not the awkward little sister who had once worn hand-me-downs to Jessica's ballet recitals. But the moment the front door opened, the old script resumed. Amity, finally, my mother said, kissing the air beside my cheek before stepping back to scan me. You've done something with your hair at last. Much better. It looks like she's driving a rental, my father added, glancing past me toward my car. No, that's yours. Oh, his brows pinched like he'd just swallowed something sour. And then Jessica appeared, elegant even in loungewear, her blonde hair catching the chandelier light, her smile practiced but sharp at the edges. Amity, she said, arms opening wide. You made it. For a moment, I let myself believe it, that maybe tonight would be different. A perfect dinner, cracking at the seams. The first hour passed almost pleasantly. We sat in Jessica's glass-walled sunroom, sipping wine. My father even seemed impressed as I explained parts of the case I'd just won. Jessica asked about the industry impact. My mother nodded thoughtfully. For the first time in my life, it felt like they were seeing me, not as Jessica's shadow, but as someone in my own right. It lowered my guard, just enough to miss the undercurrents. At dinner, the twins joined us, Sophia and Tyler, now 10 years old. Sophia was Jessica's mirror image, her blonde hair perfectly brushed, her smile rehearsed. Tyler carried Alan's posture already, rigid, his eyes cool. Aunt Amity works with buildings like Daddy, Jessica explained, her tone honeyed. Not exactly, I corrected, smiling gently at the children. I'm an attorney. I protect people's rights to their property. Alan chuckled, his voice carrying the kind of disdain only money could polish. Actually, Amity causes problems for legitimate business transactions, makes everything take twice as long. Everyone laughed, except me. Well, her seriousness has finally paid off, my father added, raising his glass. That big case must have come with a nice paycheck. Nothing compared to what Alan makes in a month, Jessica interjected smoothly, patting her husband's hand. Just like that, the flicker of recognition for my success was extinguished. 1,000 paper cuts. The comment started small, wrapped in sugar. You're still single, right, Amity? Jessica asked, tilting her head. I know a few divorced men from Alan's golf club. Maybe I could introduce you. That outfit is nice, my mother chimed in. Is that what female attorneys wear these days? So masculine. Your apartment must feel so cozy, Jessica added. I can't imagine living in such a small space again. Each jab landed like a paper cut. Small, easy to dismiss, but together they began to sting, bleeding me dry. We always hoped Amity would find a nice man and settle down, my mother sighed, her voice soft with disappointment. Not everyone can be lucky enough to find their Alan, Jessica replied with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. I noticed something then, how Jessica's eyes flicked toward our parents every time she spoke, gauging their reactions. How Alan's fingers tapped against his wine glass in a rhythm that didn't match his laughter, and how the twins smirked when Jessica's barbs landed, already learning cruelty by imitation. A shadow in the hallway. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to use the restroom. I needed air, a moment alone to collect the pieces of myself I felt slipping away. That's when I heard it, a voice, low and urgent, spilling from Alan's office. Yes, tonight, he said into the phone. She has no idea, Jessica's handling it. I froze in the doorway, my hand on the polished frame. Alan looked up, caught me in the shadows. For a moment, his expression cracked, surprise, then irritation, then a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Enjoying dinner, Amity? He asked, his tone silky. It's lovely, I lied, stepping back. Jessica's always been a wonderful hostess. His gaze lingered, sharp as a blade. Your case against Riverfront Development was impressive. You're quite the formidable opponent when you choose to be. Something in his voice made my skin crawl. The albums. Back at the table, the air had shifted. My parents were quieter now, their eyes darting between Jessica and Alan. My sister whispered to my mother, who nodded. My father cut his steak into neat, unnecessary slivers. After dessert, Jessica clapped her hands together lightly. I have wonderful news to share, she said. But before that, let's take a walk down memory lane. She motioned to Tyler, who scampered off and returned with a stack of heavy leather-bound albums. Jessica opened one to a marked page and slid it toward me. It was our grandmother's farm, the apple orchard in bloom, the old red barn leaning with age, summers that had once smelled like cut grass and tasted like fresh peaches. Remember how much we loved Grandma's place? Jessica asked, her voice syrupy sweet. Of course, I said carefully, those were wonderful summers. My father sighed heavily, shaking his head. Such a shame, what's happening to that property now? A prickle crawled across my skin. What do you mean? Jessica's smile curved slow and deliberate, like a trap snapping shut. Well, she said softly, that's actually what we wanted to talk to you about tonight. The moment Jessica pushed that leather-bound album toward me, something inside my chest tightened. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was warning. The glossy photographs of Grandma's farm weren't innocent keepsakes, they were weapons, sharpened by memory and intent. And I knew this weapon well, because my family had always used memory against me. Golden Child, Forgotten Moon. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, our house looked like the American dream painted in beige siding. A tidy lawn, a white mailbox, a row of rose bushes my mother clipped with obsessive care. On the outside, we looked like a model family. Inside, though, the rules were already writ. Jessica was the sun, I was the moon. She was 6 years older, blonde, pretty, with a smile that made strangers coo. From the beginning, everything in our household orbited her. Dance lessons, private tutoring, new designer shoes. My father cut checks without blinking. My mother beamed as she fastened glittery costumes for Jessica's endless recitals. And me, I wore her hand-me-downs. I joined free after-school programs. When I won a spot in the debate club, my parents barely noticed. But if Jessica so much as tripped across a stage, my father would leap up with roses and a camera. I tried to fight it the only way I knew, by shining in school. Straight A's, national spelling B's, debate trophies. By 8th grade, I was taking AP courses. My teachers pulled my parents aside, telling them I was gifted, maybe even brilliant. But at home, the response was always the same. Jessica has that special something, my mother would say. Some people shine naturally. The implication was clear, I didn't. The wedding that was mine. By the time Jessica was 24, she was walking down the aisle in a cathedral, dripping in pearls. My parents spent their entire savings on her wedding to Alan Thompson, the wealthy young developer with the perfect jawline and an empire already rising beneath him. It was treated like royalty. Guests filled pews, champagne fountains bubbled, and my parents beamed like they had won the lottery. Meanwhile, I was in my first year of law school, working 2 jobs, eating ramen for dinner. I'd been asked, almost casually, if I could contribute to the wedding fund. I still remember standing at the reception, holding a half-empty flute of champagne, watching Jessica spin under chandeliers. My mother's eyes glistened as she whispered, "She's secured her place in the world." And me, I wasn't even seated at the family table. The vanishing letter. I learned early that Jessica's hunger for the spotlight wasn't harmless. It was ruthless. When I was 14, I earned a scholarship to a Stanford summer program for gifted students. I remember tearing open the envelope, my hands shaking with excitement. I would spend 8 weeks at one of the best universities in the country, studying literature and law. But the letter disappeared. Weeks later, after I hadn't replied, Stanford gave my spot to another student. My mother clucked her tongue. "You must have misplaced it, darling." Years later, after a glass of wine too many, Jessica confessed. She had hidden it. "I couldn't let you outshine me," she admitted with a smirk. "Mom and Dad already thought you were too serious. They needed me to be the star." That was the first time I realized the truth. Jessica didn't just want attention. She wanted to erase me. Grandma Elizabeth. The only person who saw me, really saw me, was my grandmother Elizabeth, my father's mother. Grandma was a quiet woman with sharp eyes and hands always busy with sewing or pruning her apple orchard. Where my parents dismissed me, Grandma leaned in. She read my essays. She quizzed me on legal vocabulary. She told me I was destined for something beyond the smallness of our household. When I was 29 and she fell ill, I sat by her bedside, holding her hand. Her voice was thin but steady. "Don't let them diminish you, Amity," she whispered. "You have more strength than all of them combined." Those words etched themselves into my bones. So when she passed, and her will named me the caretaker of her farm, 20 acres of orchard, creek, and farmhouse, it was more than an inheritance. It was her final declaration, "I see you." A life in the shadows. While Jessica played hostess in her mansion, giving birth to twins and living a life my parents praised like scripture, I was clawing my way up the legal world. 10 years, 80-hour weeks. Exhaustion so deep I sometimes fell asleep at my desk. But I built my reputation one case at a time. By 34, I wasn't just practicing law, I was winning battles against the very developers Jessica's husband befriended. And yet every holiday call, every email was the same. Endless updates about Jessica's perfect children, Jessica's charity gala, Jessica's new Range Rover, my accomplishments, a footnote if mentioned at all. It was like screaming into a void, trying to prove I existed. The case that changed everything. Then came the Riverfront case. A development company had been targeting elderly homeowners, slapping them with false violation notices, then forcing them to sell their homes cheap. When the case landed on my desk, I attacked it like fire meeting dry brush. Months of sleepless nights, interviews with victims, piles of documents. And I won. The case went viral in legal circles, my face in business journals, my name whispered in firms that had once ignored me. For the first time, it was Jessica's name in lights. It was mine. And that was when Jessica called. Back at the table. The photographs of Grandma's orchard stared back at me, their edges curling with age. My throat tightened. Such a shame, my father repeated. That land just sitting there. What do you mean? I asked. Jessica's nails tapped against the leather album. Tap, tap, tap. Well, she said sweetly, we've been thinking. Grandma wasn't in her right mind when she promised you the farm. We believe it should benefit all of us. My fork slipped against the china, the screech cutting through the room. Excuse me. Alan leaned back in his chair, his cufflinks glinting under the chandelier. We've already filed paperwork to contest the will, he said casually, like he was commenting on the weather. My mother nodded as if soothing a child. Elizabeth wasn't herself, Amity, you must see that. The room tilted. Suddenly, every whispered glance, every laugh at my expense, every missing letter snapped into place. They hadn't invited me here to celebrate. They'd invited me here to steal from me. The memory that haunts me. I thought back to Grandma's final days, her grip on my hand, the rasp in her voice. The farm is yours, Amity, not to sell, to keep, something that's just yours, something no one can take away. And yet here they were, my parents, my sister, her husband, conspiring to take it anyway. For a moment, I saw myself at 14, crying silently in my room after the Stanford letter disappeared. At 24, paying my way through law school while my parents funded Jessica's royal wedding. At 29, sitting alone at the back of the funeral while Jessica greeted guests like a widow at court. The same story, over and over. But this time, I wasn't a child, I wasn't powerless. And I wasn't going to let them win. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The chandelier above us glowed like a halo, but the light felt harsh, exposing every detail of their betrayal. My parents' calm nods, Jessica's sly smile, Alan's smug posture. The leather-bound album spread open like a stage prop, as if Grandma's farm was already theirs. And then my father said it, the words snapping like a trap. We've been working with Alan's attorneys for months now. The hearing is next week. Months? They had been plotting for months, smiling at me on holiday calls, asking polite questions over email, while secretly sharpening knives for my back. I set my fork down with deliberate precision. You're challenging Grandma's will, I said flatly. Jessica pressed her palms together under her chin, feigning innocence. This isn't about challenging Amity, it's about doing what's right for the family. The farm should benefit all of us. No, I said, my voice steady despite the fire building in my chest. This isn't about family, this is about greed. The gaslight. Alan leaned forward, his voice calm, patronizing, like he was speaking to a stubborn client. Look, Amity, sentiment doesn't pay property taxes. That land is wasting away under your care. Developed properly, it could bring security for generations. My mother nodded vigorously. Think of your niece and nephew, darling. College funds, opportunities. Opportunities they don't need, I cut in, my tone sharp enough to slice through the room. Jessica lives in a mansion. Alan is a millionaire. Don't pretend this is about survival. Jessica's smile cracked. Oh, don't be dramatic. You don't understand the kind of expenses we have. Private school tuition, the summer home, the country club memberships. Those aren't needs, I snapped. They're luxuries. Her face tightened, and for the first time, I saw it. The raw jealousy she kept hidden under designer clothes and a curated smile. Whispered conspiracies. As the courses continued, the air in the dining room grew heavier. Jessica whispered to my mother between bites. Alan tapped on his phone under the table. My father's jaw flexed as he cut each bite of steak with surgical precision. I caught fragments. Caregivers, confusion, signature. By the time dessert arrived, a meticulously layered tiramisu Jessica claimed she had made herself, I knew what was coming. Jessica set her fork down with theatrical flair. Well, she said, since we're all gathered, I suppose we should tell Amity the whole truth. My stomach clenched. What truth? Alan folded his hands. The truth, Amity, is that Elizabeth wasn't in her right mind when she promised you the farm. We've consulted specialists. We have caregivers' statements. She was confused. That's a lie, I said, my voice rising. Grandma was sharp until the day she died. She passed every medical evaluation required before signing her will. Jessica leaned forward, her eyes glittering. Of course you'd say that. You helped her draft it, didn't you? How convenient that the lawyer granddaughter becomes the sole beneficiary. My father cleared his throat. No one is accusing you of manipulation, Amity, just undue influence. The word hung in the air like poison. Undue influence. The kind of legal accusation that could unravel everything. The trap tightens. You can't be serious, I whispered. You're accusing me of coercing Grandma. Jessica shrugged. If the shoe fits. My chest burned. She asked me to help her because she trusted me. She wanted to be sure her wishes were protected. You all know that. Alan's lips curled. Intentions don't matter. What matters is what can be proven in court, and we have a very strong case. I stared at my parents, searching for some flicker of doubt, some sign that they weren't fully complicit. But their faces were stone. Why? I asked finally, my voice breaking. Why are you doing this to me? Haven't you given Jessica everything she's ever wanted? Isn't it enough? My father leaned back, his voice cool. This isn't about Jessica, it's about the family, what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone, my mother echoed. And Jessica's family needs it more. The question. Something in me snapped then. A lifetime of swallowing words, of dimming my light, of shrinking myself to fit into their narrow view, erupted. I slammed my hand on the table, startling even myself. Tell me the truth, I demanded. When have you ever chosen me over her? Once, just once in my entire life. When have you put me first? The silence was deafening. The only sound was the faint tick of Jessica's grandfather clock in the corner. My parents exchanged a glance. Jessica smirked. Alan watched me like a hawk. No one answered. The children joined in. From the staircase, the twins had crept down, their faces peeking through the railing. Tyler whispered something to Sophia, and she giggled. Then he called out, loud enough for the table to hear. Aunt Amity, why don't you have any kids? The room froze. Before I could answer, Jessica spoke, her tone saccharine sweet. Some women just aren't meant to be mothers, Tyler. Laughter followed, light, cruel, unthinking. My parents chuckled. Alan smirked. Even the children giggled, parroting the cruelty of their parents. And me, I sat there, the weight of their mockery pressing against my chest like a stone. The shattering. I excused myself to the restroom again, not because I needed it, but because I needed to breathe. I splashed cold water on my face, staring into the mirror. My reflection looked foreign, eyes too wide, shoulders trembling, lips pressed tight. When I returned, I noticed something odd. Alan's office door was ajar, and a folder lay half open on his desk. The glimpse of paperwork made my stomach drop. Schematics, contracts, the kind of development documents I'd seen 100 times before. Luxury housing, right on Grandma's farm. My grandmother's orchard, reduced to lines on a blueprint. When I re-entered the dining room, Jessica was whispering to our mother again. Alan looked satisfied. My father nodded. And I realized, they weren't just plotting. They had already set the wheels in motion. The final straw. Dessert plates clinked. Wine glasses emptied. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Jessica leaned back, crossing her arms. Here's the bottom line, Amity. You sign the paperwork, accept an equal share, and we avoid a public fight. Or you drag this into court, drain the estate with legal fees and lose anyway. Your choice. I looked around the table, the people who were supposed to be my family. My mother's pearls glinting, my father's stoic disapproval, Alan's calculating smirk, Jessica's perfect hair framing a face twisted with triumph. And I realized something chilling. They weren't afraid of me. They thought they'd already won. I opened my mouth to speak, when Jessica suddenly glanced at the crystal water pitcher in the center of the table. Her hand twitched toward it, then paused, her eyes locking onto mine with a glimmer of something dangerous. My breath caught. Was she really about to? Jessica's hand lingered on the crystal pitcher, her manicured fingers tracing the cool surface. She didn't have to speak, her smirk said it all. My pulse quickened, my eyes darting between her poised fingers and the table around us. My mother's expectant gaze, my father's tightened jaw. Alan's smug silence. They were waiting. Jessica, I started, my voice breaking slightly. But she cut me off with a laugh. You've always been so serious, Amity, so dramatic. Maybe what you need is to lighten up. And with a flick of her wrist, she tipped the pitcher. Baptism by ice. The water hit me before I could move. Ice cold, shocking, like plunging headfirst into a frozen river. It cascaded down my shoulders, soaking my hair, my blouse, my lap. My breath caught in my throat as the icy sting spread across my skin, goosebumps erupting instantly. The children squealed with delight. My mother gasped, but not in protest, in amusement. Alan laughed outright, clapping his hands together once like it was the punchline to a long-prepared joke. Jessica leaned back, her face glowing with satisfaction. There, she said sweetly, now you're baptized into reality. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood as I shoved it back, water dripping onto the floor. My heart pounded so violently I could hear it in my ears. I choked out, my voice trembling, you think this is funny? Alan smirked. A little dramatic, don't you think? It's just water. Just water, my voice cracked, louder this time. You've been plotting to steal from me, gaslighting me, humiliating me in front of your children, and now this. Jessica waved a dismissive hand, her bracelets jingling like bells. Don't be so sensitive, Amity. It's all in good fun. You're the one turning it into a spectacle. The room tilts. I looked at my parents, desperate for one of them to intervene. To say enough was enough. But my mother only sipped her wine, her lips twitching at the corners. My father shook his head slightly, as though I were a misbehaving child throwing a tantrum. Humiliation burned hotter than the cold soaking my body. My chest tightened, my vision blurred at the edges. I could smell the roasted lamb still lingering on the air, mixing with the metallic scent of water soaking into my blouse. The crystal chandelier above flickered, its light refracting through droplets sliding down my face. The sound of laughter echoed like a warped carnival. I was drowning in more than water. I was drowning in betrayal. The cruelty of children. Tyler pointed at me, his voice high with laughter. Aunt Amity looks like a drowned rat. Sophia giggled so hard, she slapped her little hand against the table. Do it again, Mommy. My heart twisted. They weren't just laughing, they were learning. Watching their mother humiliate me, watching their grandparents condone it, and memorizing cruelty as a family tradition. Jessica winked at them. See, Aunt Amity doesn't mind, she's tough. I do mind, I snapped, my voice shaking with rage. You're teaching them that bullying is entertainment, that cruelty is love. Jessica tilted her head, mock concern on her face. Oh, Amity, you really should see someone about all that anger. Breaking point. Something inside me broke then, not like glass shattering, but like a dam giving way. Years of being second best, overlooked, dismissed, and laughed at surged forward all at once. I slammed both palms on the table, hard enough that silverware rattled and wine glasses wobbled. Enough, I roared. The room fell silent. Even the children stopped giggling, their eyes wide. I stood there, dripping water onto the gleaming hardwood, my chest heaving, my hair plastered to my face. I locked eyes with each of them, my parents, Jessica, Alan, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker behind their arrogance. You've taken from me my entire life, I said, my voice low but vibrating with fury. My opportunities, my dignity, my family. And now you want to take the one thing my grandmother entrusted to me, over my dead body. Alan leaned back slowly, his smirk faltering. Jessica's smile stiffened. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My mother's glass trembled in her hand. I wasn't the forgotten little sister anymore. I was a storm, and they weren't prepared for it. The aftershock. No one spoke for several long, suffocating seconds. The only sound was water dripping from my clothes onto the polished floor. Finally, Jessica scoffed, her voice weaker than before. Always so dramatic. Honestly, you should thank us. We're offering you a share. Without us, you'll never manage the farm. You'll drown in responsibility. Better to drown alone, I said coldly, than let you hold my head underwater. The words landed like a slap. Alan's jaw tightened. My father's face turned red. My mother set her wine glass down too quickly, the crystal clinking against the table. I turned on my heel, my wet shoes squelching against the floor, and headed for the front door. The final blow. But as I reached for the handle, Jessica's voice called after me, sharp and cutting. "You'll regret this, Amity, we always win." I stopped, my hand hovering over the doorknob. My heart hammered in my chest, but my voice came out calm, almost eerily so. "Not this time," I said without turning. And then I walked out into the cold night air, drenched, shivering, but freer than I had ever felt in my life. The night sky loomed above me, dark and endless, but for the first time I didn't feel small beneath it. I felt powerful. Because betrayal had baptized me, and now I was reborn. I didn't make it far before the shaking started. By the time I reached my apartment downtown, the cold had sunk into my bones, a shiver that wouldn't stop no matter how high I cranked the heater. My blouse clung to me like wet paper, my hair dripping into my eyes. I stumbled into the bathroom, stripping off the drenched fabric, and caught sight of myself in the mirror. My skin was blotched red from the ice water. My lips pale, my eyes wide and haunted. I looked less like an attorney who just won a landmark case and more like a survivor who had barely crawled out of wreckage. That was when I noticed the bruising. Along my forearms, faint purplish marks were beginning to surface, where the edge of the heavy glass pitcher had slammed against me before the water poured. My wrist ached, too, from where I'd slammed it against the table in anger. It wasn't just humiliation, it was injury. The hospital. 2 hours later, I sat on the hard plastic chair of an emergency room, wrapped in an oversized sweatshirt, my damp hair pulled into a messy knot. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too sterile. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and old coffee. When the nurse called my name, I followed her numbly. She took my vitals, asked what had happened. I hesitated, then said the words out loud. My sister dumped a pitcher of ice water on me. Her pen froze on the clipboard, she looked up, her eyes narrowing. On purpose. Yes, I said, my throat tightening. She didn't press further. She simply wrote something down and guided me into an exam room. The doctor arrived, a kind man with tired eyes. He examined the bruises forming on my arm, the swelling in my wrist, the redness across my skin. Looks like contusions, he said gently. We'll do x-rays on the wrist to rule out a fracture. I nodded, silent. The x-ray room was colder than the waiting room. The machine hummed as I positioned my wrist under its unyielding weight. Each click of the camera echoed in my head like a gunshot. When the films were done, the technician helped me back to the exam room. The doctor returned with the results. No fracture, just severe bruising. He wrapped my wrist in a compression bandage, handed me a packet of aftercare instructions, and paused. You know, he said carefully, we're required to document suspected assault. Do you want to make a statement? For a moment I couldn't breathe. Assault, that was the word, not family drama, not sibling spat. Assault. I need to think, I whispered. He nodded, take your time. But know this, if you decide to press charges later, this report and these x-rays are evidence. Evidence, the word settled into me like a stone. The paper trail. When I got home, I laid everything out on my kitchen table. The hospital discharge papers, the x-ray results, the aftercare instructions. I took photos of the bruises forming on my arms, the swelling in my wrist, the wet clothes still smelling faintly of Jessica's expensive perfume and Alan's cigars. Each item was proof. Each mark on my body was a receipt for the betrayal I'd endured. I opened my laptop and pulled up court records. My name was already there, listed as a defendant in the will contest Alan had filed. The hearing date loomed in black text. They wanted to take Grandma's farm. But now I had something they didn't expect. A record. The silence of friends. That night, I called two of my closest friends from law school. Both were attorneys now. Both had known pieces of my family story over the years, but never the full picture. When I told them what happened, there was silence on the line. Wait, Daniel finally said. She assaulted you, in front of your parents, and they laughed. Yes. And you went to the hospital. Yes. Then you don't just have a will contest, he said, his voice steady. You have a pattern, abuse, coercion, and now physical evidence. You can build a case not just to defend the will but to expose them. For the first time, hope flickered in my chest. Sleepless. But hope didn't erase the nightmares. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner over and over. The way the water had hit me, the children's laughter, my parents' silence, Jessica's voice, now you're baptized into reality. I couldn't shake it. My chest tightened, my breathing shallow. At one point I sat up, gasping, convinced I could still feel water dripping down my scalp. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed my face with warm water this time, and gripped the counter until my knuckles whitened. This is not the end, I whispered to my reflection. This is the beginning. A visit to the farm. The next morning I drove out to Grandma's farm. The orchard was quiet, the trees bare in the winter chill. Frost clung to the branches, sparkling in the pale sunlight. The red barn leaned as it always had, sturdy despite its age. I stood in the middle of the field, the cold air biting at my cheeks, and closed my eyes. I could almost hear her voice. This land is yours, Amity, not theirs, yours. I made a silent promise then. I would not let them bulldoze it into condos. I would not let Jessica's laughter be the last word. This land was my anchor, and I would defend it with everything I had. Evidence of more. Later that week, I received a message from one of Grandma's old caregivers. She had heard whispers about the contest. I want you to know, she said, her voice trembling through the phone, your grandmother was sharp until the end. She knew exactly what she was doing when she left the farm to you. If they say otherwise, they're lying. Would you be willing to put that in writing? I asked carefully. There was a pause, then. Yes, Elizabeth trusted you. She wanted you to have that land, I'll swear to it. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Not just my word, not just medical records, but testimony. The tide was turning. The photographs wouldn't stop shaking in my hands. Someone had followed me. Someone had sat outside that hospital, snapping pictures, while I clutched my discharge papers like a lifeline. It wasn't just intimidation, it was surveillance. The note burned into my mind. Careful, Amity, we always win. Always, that was the word Jessica loved most, wasn't it? She always got the bigger bedroom, always got the new clothes, always got the applause, and now always thought she could take what was mine. But not this time. The ally. The next morning, I called Daniel again. His voice sharpened the moment I read the note aloud. Do not ignore this, he said firmly. This is harassment and possibly stalking. Save the envelope, the photos, everything. Don't touch them more than you have to. I'll put you in touch with a friend of mine at the DA's office. My pulse raced. You think it's that serious? Amity, he said, his tone softer now, these people aren't just greedy. They're desperate, and desperate people make dangerous choices. Don't face them alone. For the first time, I felt the faintest glimmer of relief. I wasn't alone. Family ties. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about my parents. The way they'd nodded along with Jessica's cruelty. The way they'd clapped when the water hit me. I hadn't spoken to them since that night, but now the silence gnawed at me. Against my better judgment, I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice wary. Amity. Yes, it's me. A pause, then, almost too quickly. We didn't mean for things to go so far. I laughed bitterly. You applauded while your daughter assaulted me at a dinner table. How far did you think it would go? Silence, then in a quieter voice. Your father and I, we thought Jessica was handling things. We thought it was for the best. For the best, I repeated flatly. For who? For her, for Alan, certainly not for me, or Grandma. Her breath hitched. You know we've always loved you, Amity. Loved me? My voice cracked. You watched me be humiliated and you laughed. That's not love, that's complicity. Before she could respond, I hung up. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. The divide between us was wider than ever. The investigator. Daniel's contact at the DA's office, a woman named Marissa, agreed to meet me. We sat in a quiet corner of a cafe downtown, the photos spread between us. This isn't random, she said, flipping through them. Someone close to you wanted you to know they're watching. My guess, Jessica or Alan hired someone, but here's the thing, this could backfire. How? Because intimidation is evidence too. Judges don't like parties who try to scare witnesses or beneficiaries. If you bring this up in court, it strengthens your credibility and weakens theirs. I leaned back, exhaling, so I should keep going. She gave me a long look. That depends. How far are you willing to take this? Her question lingered long after the meeting. How far was I willing to go? The confession. That night, I got an unexpected call from Alan. His voice was strained, almost unrecognizable. Amity, we need to talk. I don't think we have anything left to say, I replied coldly. Please just hear me out, not Jessica, just me. Against every instinct, I agreed to meet him. Curiosity, or maybe the need for closure, pulled me in. We met in a nearly empty parking lot near his office building, the cold night air swirling around us. His expensive suit looked rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. I didn't send those photos, he blurted. That wasn't me. I crossed my arms. Then who? Jessica, he said without hesitation. She's unraveling. I can't control her anymore. She wanted to break you down before the hearing. I stared at him, stunned. And you just let her? He ran a hand through his hair. Do you think I wanted this? My company, under investigation, my marriage is collapsing, and now she's turning this into war. But there's something you don't know, something I should have told you sooner. I narrowed my eyes. What is it? He swallowed hard. Your parents. They knew about the plan to contest the will months before you did. Jessica made them believe it was their idea. She told them you manipulated Elizabeth. They believed her. My stomach dropped. So they lied to me. He nodded. Willingly. They thought they were protecting the family legacy. But it was all Jessica. She's been orchestrating this from the start. My head spun. The betrayal wasn't just Jessica. It was all of them. A dangerous offer. Alan leaned closer, his voice urgent. I can help you. I can testify that Jessica pushed your parents into this, that she forged documents, that she's the one who ordered surveillance, but I need something in return. I laughed bitterly. Of course you do. Immunity, he said flatly. If you use the evidence you've been gathering against Thompson Enterprises, I'll go down for fraud. But if you negotiate immunity for me, I'll hand you everything you need to destroy Jessica's case. The audacity of him. The same man who mocked my career, who enabled Jessica's cruelty, who built his empire on exploitation, now begging for protection. Why should I save you? I asked quietly. His jaw tightened. Because without me, you'll never prove the forgery, and Jessica will keep coming for you until she wins. Torn. I drove home with his words echoing in my head. The dilemma clawed at me. Loyalty to my grandmother's memory demanded I fight Jessica, expose her lies, preserve the farm. But truth demanded I also hold Alan accountable for the fraud, the exploitation, the lives he'd ruined. Could I really trade justice for one man to stop the betrayal of another? I stared at the photographs again, the bruises on my arm, the X-rays spread across my table. My grandmother's voice came back to me. Don't let them diminish you. Diminish me, that's what they wanted, to shrink me into silence, to scare me into surrender. No more. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension. My heels clicked against the tile as I walked toward the plaintiff's table, every eye in the room following me. Jessica sat across from me, her designer suit a shade too bright, her smile brittle. Alan sat beside her, jaw tight, sweat already beating at his temples. My parents flanked them both like loyal soldiers, though their eyes betrayed unease. I set my briefcase down. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family outsider, I was their opponent. The hearing. The judge was a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful. She wasted no time. Case number 2491, she said. The estate of Elizabeth Walker, contested by the family of Jessica Thompson. Counsel, proceed. Jessica's attorney stood first, slick and confident. He painted me as manipulative, a lawyer who had influenced an elderly woman to benefit disproportionately. He produced caregivers' statements, which Jessica and Alan had gathered, fabricated, I knew. He gestured dramatically toward Jessica, the grieving granddaughter, the one who only wanted to protect the family legacy. When it was my turn, I rose slowly. My heart thundered, but my voice was steady. Your Honor, I began, this case is not about family legacy. It is about the manipulation of truth for personal gain. My grandmother, Elizabeth Walker, was of sound mind when she drafted her will and established the trust. I know this because I was her attorney. But don't take my word for it. Take the word of the 3 physicians who evaluated her competency. Take the documents signed years before her passing. Take the no contest clause she insisted on, including one that disinherits anyone who challenges her wishes. I laid out the evidence, the physicians' evaluations, the ironclad trust, the no contest clause highlighted in yellow. Then, I slid forward the laboratory analysis, the forgery Jessica and Alan had attempted years earlier. And finally, I said, my voice sharpening, evidence of fraudulent intent. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jessica's smile faltered. Alan's face turned crimson. The judge leaned forward. You're alleging forgery. Yes, Your Honor. Attempted deed transfer with falsified signatures. The lab results confirm it. That is not only a violation of my grandmother's trust, it is elder abuse. The weight of my words settled over the room like a storm cloud. The collapse. Alan broke first. Mid-testimony, under the heat of cross-examination, his composure cracked. I didn't forge anything, he stammered. It was Jessica's idea. She wanted the land, she pushed me into it. Jessica whipped her head toward him, her eyes wide. You liar, you signed the papers. You told me it was airtight. Their voices rose, accusations volleyed across the courtroom while my parents sat frozen. For once, Jessica's performance wasn't applause-worthy. It was unraveling. The judge slammed her gavel. Order. But the damage was done. Their alliance fractured in full view of the court. The verdict. After hours of testimony, the judge delivered her ruling. The court finds that the trust established by Elizabeth Walker is valid, binding, and enforceable. The farm remains the sole property of Amity Walker. Furthermore, the evidence of forgery and fraudulent intent will be referred to the district attorney's office for further investigation. The gavel fell. Jessica's face drained of color. My parents looked as though the ground had opened beneath them. Alan muttered something about appeals, but his lawyer's eyes had already darkened with defeat. I walked out of that courtroom taller than I had ever stood. Fallout. The weeks that followed were chaos. Alan's company spiraled under the weight of investigations. Fraud, elder abuse, bribery of officials, charges stacked like bricks. He eventually took a plea deal, restitution, fines, and 3 years in federal prison. Jessica's life collapsed in tandem. With the mortgage payments unpaid and foreclosure imminent, I offered her a choice: fight me in court and lose everything, or sell the mansion with my help and downsize. She chose survival. For the first time in her life, Jessica had to get a real job, retail management at an upscale department store. My parents, they didn't know how to look me in the eye. My father buried himself in work. My mother reached out haltingly, asking for coffee. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But it was the beginning of honesty. Therapy. The bruises on my arms faded. The swelling in my wrist subsided. But the scars inside, the humiliation, the betrayal, ran deeper. I started therapy. At first, the words lodged in my throat. But slowly, I began to untangle the truth. My entire life had been shaped by the hunger for my family's approval. Every A on a report card, every late night at the office, every legal victory, I was chasing their validation. That night at Jessica's dinner table, drenched in ice water, I finally saw the futility. I had never been the problem. Their blindness had. Breaking free from that cycle was the hardest work I'd ever done. Harder than law school, harder than any trial, but it was worth it. The farm. 1 year later, I stood on the porch of my grandmother's farmhouse. The apple orchard stretched before me, golden in the September sun. Children's laughter drifted across the fields, local schoolkids visiting for the community garden program I'd started. Volunteers weeded flower beds. Inside the barn, the legal aid center hummed with life, providing free services to elderly residents. This farm was no longer just land. It was legacy, a promise kept. The scar. There's still a faint mark on my wrist, where the bone had swollen from that night. A small, almost invisible scar. Most people don't notice it, but I do. It isn't just a reminder of betrayal. It's proof of survival. Proof that even when my own family tried to drown me, I rose. Final reflection. I used to think family was everything, that their approval defined my worth. But the truth is, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who stand beside you when everyone else turns away. Sometimes it's the community you build from scratch, the friends who believe you when no one else will. If you've ever been diminished by the people who should have lifted you up, hear me. Their failure to see your value does not erase it. Sometimes the baptism of betrayal is what washes you clean enough to see yourself clearly for the first time. That was my story, the night my family tried to break me and instead set me free. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment when humiliation or betrayal turned into your turning point? Share it in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, subscribe for more true stories about finding strength in the places you least expect. Because sometimes, the night you think will ruin you is the night that saw.